those listings have hundreds of pictures for that car. So I think that's a very strong visual addition to the player.
How do we make podcasts a more visually engaging medium without necessarily using video? Brian Williams has some ideas, plus Sam's back, and what to do about Apple Podcasts.
With James Cridland and Sam Sethi. This is the Pod News Weekly Review with Buzzsprout. Start podcasting, keep podcasting.
Well, I'm back, James. Did you miss me?
Oh, massively.
Overcast must be super happy. They're growing 28% year on year. Or, as Dave Jones suspect, is there something afoot? Tell me more, James.
Well, is there something afoot? Yes. So Overcast, according to Buzzsprout, our sponsor, their stats for June show that Overcast has increased by 28% year on year. That's total downloads. Interestingly, Transistor also shows a 22% increase in Overcast year on year. Pretty well everybody else is static. Spotify is down, but that could just be video. So hooray for Overcast. I mean, obviously, Overcast has been in the news recently with transcriptions and all of that thing. Overcast has been more in the news for those of us in Podcasting 2.0 because Marco Arment jumped in and said, I don't want any of this server signature stuff. I have a user agent that says Overcast and that should be enough. And I will not even consider anything more than that. So Overcast has certainly been making a name for itself. So it clearly has paid off, hasn't it, Sam?
Well, according to the pod sage, Dave Jones, he says, or is it Claude just likes building bots that use Overcast as the user agent to bypass filtering, aka Adam Curry? We've seen it done already. Yes. What's your thoughts, James? Is it bots using the Overcast user agent, or is Marco Arment onto something?
I think there are three things. I think firstly, Marco Arment is onto something. He got a lot of coverage for his transcriptions. Secondly, I think that yes, Claude does like using Overcast as a user agent. It's very easy, even if you just ask Claude to do that, it will do that, which, by the way, would be fixed with server signatures. And then there's the third thing. There is talk of Overcast actually having a download bug where it downloads and downloads and downloads again and downloads again. And it could well be that there's a download bug as well. Now, I've asked for details from the person that pointed that out. Haven't had any of those details. So what I might do is go digging into some of the stats and seeing if I can actually see any evidence of that going on in some of the data that I can see. But certainly, I think there's more than meets the eye here in terms of Overcast's numbers. But on the other side, it's really good to see an independent podcast app, one that isn't doing anything naughty or nefarious, itself at least, appearing so high in the charts. So many congratulations if this is true.
So he's not downcast, he's over the moon.
Hey.
Ba-bum.
Ba-bum.
Right. Yes, I'll go back on holiday, don't worry. Now, Apple's market share, according to Ashley Carman at Bloomberg, is declining, James. Why?
Well, so this isn't market share. This is the share of people who say that their number one podcast app is ... Apple is definitely going down in terms of that. That is the case according to Edison Podcast Metrics. It's the case according to Signal Hill Insights as well. So Apple Podcasts is less of a go-to app, if you like. In terms of downloads, interestingly, as you may have seen in the Pod News newsletter yesterday, Thursday, the total downloads, for example, if you look at the UK, total downloads to Apple Podcasts has gone up. So it's 37.5% of all downloads in the UK, according to OP3, according to our data there. So I think that there's different numbers, as is always the case here. I think it's also the fact that we can't see Spotify video anymore. We obviously can't see YouTube numbers in OP3 either. And so therefore there's going to be some differences there. But I do worry about Apple because I'm kind of thinking that Apple... they're still behaving, aren't they, as if they're the number one top dog in podcast aggregators. And I'm not so sure that they really are anymore. And you can swagger and swagger for as much as you like, but actually at the end of the day, when people start realizing what the numbers are, then I'm not so sure that they are quite as healthy as Apple's swagger would lead you to believe.
Well, I've got, as you know, multiple complaints about Apple. I mean, I am an Apple fanboy. I'm looking forward to the iPhone 18 Ultra, yada, yada, yada. But the auto downloads really annoys me that they set that on by default. I think that should be a user choice. I hate the fact that they are the default app and they don't allow that to change. And I know there's the reason why. But if you type the word podcast in an iOS app, it comes up with Apple only. That's the first thing it does. There's no choice. So I think that's very monopolistic. And again, I also think what we're seeing with
But
Apple,
none of that is helping them, Sam, though, is it? I mean, that's the weird thing.
Well, it is because it's keeping them where they are. I mean, if they're losing market share and they have all of those advantages already, then they're in bigger trouble than I think.
Indeed, because they are most certainly. I mean, Apple is nowhere near as big a percentage of the market as it's been. Paul Rismandel in the article that Ashley Carman wrote said something quite intelligent and clever because he is, saying that it isn't that Apple is actually losing. It's actually that the podcast audience is gaining and people aren't thinking about Apple first. And from a lot of people, I'm hearing the same sort of thing. I'm hearing that Apple is actually, it's great if you've got big numbers on Apple, but we're not seeing new people getting into Apple. And certainly some of the data that I've seen from new podcast listeners, what platforms do you use? Well, new podcast listeners, Apple Podcasts really isn't anywhere. And that's a real concern because old podcast listeners eventually die. And so we do need a replenishing
You're not talking
plan
about
there.
me, are you? You're not talking about me.
So I do think that is a bit of a concern. But of course, the main story from Ashley was all about video and how video seems to, quote, show early promise, according to the article. But again, I'm not entirely convinced by that either.
Well, my initial thought was that if you look at YouTube and with the sort of, way that people want to go video first at the moment, it's the fashionable thing to do, then they are very clearly, you land on YouTube and it's video in your face. And then if you want to find the audio podcast, they are there somewhere. And if you want to find the music, it's sort of there as well. So it is a video first platform. You look at Spotify, it's a music first platform. That's really why my children stay on it. And then podcasting and all the other bits are secondary to that. I look at Apple and they have the same problem, I think, that Amazon has. They are exposing their internal corporate fiefdoms. So instead of having one app, Apple Podcasts, with Apple Music and Apple Books, they have three apps. And they're not synergistic, and that's the same with Amazon. And I think the problem is that young people don't turn to Apple Music first, they turn to Spotify first. And that loss lead means that Apple Podcasts is always going to play catch up. I don't know. I think they're not video first and they're not music first. And I think those two elements are going to affect Apple.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see that. I guess if you look at and you use Apple Music next to Apple TV, next to Apple Podcasts, it's the same app basically. It's the same app with just different content inside it, which I think is interesting. They don't necessarily cross-post as much as they should, but there is a little bit of cross-posting in there. But I think certainly, Apple Podcasts to me has the swagger of somebody that is number one. But they are, well, according to Edison Research, this week, they are number 4 in the UK. After BBC Sounds, after Spotify, and of course after YouTube, which is now number 1. So, again, I think that Apple's swagger it's absolutely fine to have that swagger if you're number 1. But if you're just number 4, then I think you have to be working a little bit harder than just, but we're Apple, don't you know who we are? And that's their relationship with journalists. That's their relationship with podcast hosting companies. That's their relationship with all kinds of things. No one else would get people jumping through as many hoops as Apple has been doing. And there are good things around that, and there are bad things around that. But I don't necessarily think that it's particularly helpful for us as an industry, for Apple to have the swagger that it has without the numbers that actually back up that swagger.
Yeah, but, again, we saw this with the Apple API for the video. They literally turned around to every host and said, this is the way you will do it. And we all jumped. It was a case of, jump, and we all went, how high, right? Yeah. So they still have that powered domain over the industry.
Yeah, they do. But there will be a point where the industry turns around and said, and why would we do that for you? Because you're the fourth biggest. You're tiny. Why on earth would we bother? So I think that's the thing that if I was working at Apple, I would be concerned about now, is that actually they don't promote Apple Podcasts at all externally. There are no promotions for Apple Podcasts as a service. The only work they do is this work within the industry, which is okay, but that's fine. The other thing that I did see in Ashley's piece was about Acast. And yet again, here's another positive story from Acast about Apple Video. And Acast appear to have leaked to Ashley that the video shows that Acast has, 180 video shows now, have seen around a 25% jump in Apple consumption. And Acast magically has got that number to Ashley to report on. And it occurs to me, there's something weird going on here, Sam, because we've had this, right? Acast saying how lovely and wonderful Apple Podcast video is. Apple Podcasts at the podcast show in London, that was essentially Apple Podcasts talking on a stage with an Acast executive and 2 Acast talent. Acast released something very early on saying that it was the first company, not true by the way, but it was the first company to be earning revenue from video podcasts, which by the way is revenue that Apple will get. And I don't know if you saw recently Creators We Love UK and Ireland, which was a new feature that came out in the UK from Apple Podcasts. The only people in there, the only creators that Apple Podcasts apparently love in the UK and Ireland are, weirdly, on Acast and our video-enabled podcasts. What's going on with Apple and Acast, and could they please get a room?
They both begin with A. That's it. That's the only thing, James.
Yeah, that's probably it.
I guess if Apple were thinking about implementing this video stuff, they've probably gone and looked at one partner who they can work with early under NDA. That was probably Acast. They probably put engineering resource at it early. Because I know, for example, Transistor were complaining that they were late to the party being offered all of the API access.
Yeah.
I don't think. Well, we'll see. I don't think there's any more in it other than they picked one lucky partner to work with early, and it happened to be Acast this time.
Just a strange old thing. On that, by the way, Riverside, the latest to enable Apple Podcasts HLS video. If you host podcasts on the platform, there doesn't appear to be any complicated pricing plans. It's just if you're on the Grow plan or above, which I think is $29 a month, then you get Apple Podcasts HLS video as well. So that's an interesting thing too.
The other thing was I'm still annoyed that all of this video is not available to other podcast apps because it's not available in the alternative enclosure. I know companies like Transistor are using the HLS they produce for Apple and putting it in the alternative enclosure, but that's not true of our sponsors. That's not true of Acast. That's not true of AdsWears or any of the others.
No. And so again, you kind of ask yourself, well, is there something there in terms of in terms of that relationship with Apple. Are people really nervous about upsetting Apple? And again, you can have that swagger if you're number one. I'll keep on saying it. You can have that swagger if you're number one, but if you're a number four, you're an also ran, and you have none of that swagger anymore. So I hope that they get this fixed, and I hope that Apple actually puts one of the richest companies in the world, who are going to get richer, by the way, from video, in podcasts, because they are going to be grabbing a fee for every ad which is shared. Is Apple going to be doing something in terms of helping promote Apple Podcasts to normal human beings? I don't know.
You've said you're waiting for the new Apple TV hardware, so am I. No sight or sound of that yet. Is this going to be when they really accelerate the support for video in all of their platforms? Will we, do you think, see a new podcast app for Apple, which is video first rather than audio first?
I mean, arguably, you could say that the podcast app from Apple is video first. If you open that as a brand new user, then you will see lots of video and much less audio these days. So arguably, you could claim that anyway. I think that in terms of Apple TV, and I don't have one because I am literally waiting for the new hardware, but I would think that, again, the problem with video podcasts is that they're not in the Apple TV app on Apple TV, the Apple TV app on Apple TV, on the Apple TV device. And because they're therefore not where everything else that you would watch from Apple is, I wonder how many people are going to open that purple, the purple box to get their video podcasts out of there. Because, again, I haven't seen any promotion outside of people who are already listening to podcasts on Apple Podcasts. I haven't seen any promotion within Apple of, here's where you can watch lots of your favorite shows now. And I can't help but think it's going to be very confusing if you're an Apple TV device user to have lots of content in the Apple TV app, and then there's a bit of content in the Apple Podcasts app as well. It's going to be very strange.
Well, we'll wait and see in September. Now, moving on, James. We're not going to get too technical here, but I did want to just raise the flag on a story I saw that was from June the 30th, yes. And you and I, for probably the best part of 3, maybe even 4 years, have been talking about micropayments, talking about Bitcoin sats, talking about how value for value works. And, I think the concept of being able to pay peer-to-peer, fan to creator directly with some small token of value, a micropayment, is a good idea, right? The internet doesn't have a layer of micropayment. Now, the industry we're in, the podcast industry, has tried to adopt Bitcoin micropayments as a way of doing it. And I'll be the first to say I don't think it's been a success. I think it's been overly complex. I think there's been too much change. And I think we've confused those early adopters, and let alone got the mass adoption from the mainstream. I don't think we've got any of that at all. I've always said that there has to be a trigger. If this is going to work, there has to be a trigger. And that trigger could have been, do you remember Elon Musk was talking about getting into micropayments with X? And I thought, okay, well, I'm not happy, but if he issues 300 million wallets and explains what they are, and people on X start using it, maybe they'll look to podcasting and use it there as well. But that never happened. But something's come up called OpenUSD. Now, I've been not a staunch advocate, because that's not the right word, but I've been interested in this thing called stablecoins, which are digital coins that are pegged to the dollar currency in this case. And last week, this thing called OpenUSD, 140 financial institutions got behind, and it's really being driven by Stripe, because they bought a company called Bridge. And now they've given the CEO from Bridge the role to run this thing called OpenUSD, Zach Abrahams. And the idea is that this will be linked to your bank account, your checking account, your current account, whichever word your country uses, where you'll be able to move money from one to the other. And maybe they haven't talked about what standards they're going to use, i.e. what wallet and what mechanism, but it looks like something called X402. Any thoughts from you on this? Because I'm not saying this is the way forward, but I'm interested to follow the story forward because I think it has some legs.
Yeah, I think it's definitely got some legs. So OpenUSD, the companies and lots of companies have signed on, including my business bank. I can see in here in Australia, as well as Stripe, the people who take credit card payments from me. There's MoonPay, I've heard of them. There's Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. They're all there as well as interesting companies like Cloudflare, for example, who have things to gain from the ease of micropayments. So I think that there's definitely something going on here which is worthwhile taking a peek at. Google's also in this list. Apple is not, by the way. In terms of what it might mean, I think it's a little bit too early because we don't necessarily know what this is going to fix. We have, in most countries, we have programmable money anyway. And by programmable money, I mean some form of API that I can connect to my bank that will transfer money for me on my behalf. We've already got that in most countries. In most countries, there is a standard which is a national standard, which allows you to do that for whatever bank you happen to be banking with. I do know that the US is not that, and so therefore, from the US's point of view, it'll look very exciting to them. What we don't necessarily know is what this means in terms of costs. I mean, Visa and MasterCard particularly earn their money from two things. They earn their money from a percentage which is put on all credit card payments, which is fine. And they earn their money from a payment cost as well. And so for me, for example, I think from memory, it's something like 30 cents to accept a credit card payment. And then there's a 3.5% cut on top of that. And those are the fees that I pay. Now, the 3.5% is fine. But the, whatever it is, 30 cents, 50 cents, to accept the payment basically kills individual micropayments stone dead, because I can't pay 2 cents a minute to listen to this show if you're going to charge me 30 cents every time I send some money, because it just all goes to the bank in that way. So if this fixes that, which we have no visibility of, and you could argue, well, why would they fix it? Because all these people earn money out of that fee. But if this fixes that, and if it drops everything down to literally 2 or 3%, then I think that would be super exciting, because it would enable us all of a sudden to say, if you really like this show, just pay us a cent a minute. That's all I want. Pay us a cent a minute and away we go. So it's exciting if you have a look at it from that point of view. Probably way too early. And I suppose the question is, what happens next? Will this be the case? Will this be put into action in the next couple of weeks, or will this be put into action in the next 5 years? Will we have it by the Brisbane Olympics, for example? Who knows? But it could be very exciting, or it could be a total waste of time.
Yeah, I think the driver isn't really podcasting, obviously. I don't think the driver is even humans. I think the driver is AI agents being able to autonomously pay for web compute or buy product on our behalf. And that's why I think everyone's getting excited, because then they can start to build this agentic AI layer over the internet. And that's where I think it's going.
And the only thing that I would say is you can do that today. You can do that today in the UK with the Open API work. You can do that today in Australia, across the Nordics, in India. But they're all different. And so if this is essentially a unified API for programmable money to shift money around, then great. Because we sorely need a global standard. But we've got that standard if you want to already within individual countries. It's just that doesn't necessarily work when you start having a look at content which is produced on a global basis.
The other last thing I'd say on it is, where's the open Aussie dollar? Where's the open pound? Where's the open euro, right? Are we all going to have to transact in US dollars?
And then that'll add additional money, for us. I can't imagine that governments will be particularly happy with all of a sudden all of the online payments being done through US dollars. I can't imagine that that's going to be a thing that governments really want.
Really? Well, you say that, but we have the petrochemical dollar, right? Every barrel of oil is traded in dollars, and that's why the US can have such a high 37 trillion debt, because they can publish anything they like and they can put treasury bonds out, and because the world needs dollars. And if they get OpenUSD to be the universal standard, have we just moved to a dollar-denominated world?
Yeah, well, I would imagine that the European Union will have a thing or two to say about that, apart from anything else. But yes, I mean, because that again is where some of the complication comes in. I mean, I'm paid in US dollars every single month, and US dollars have become less valuable over the last 6 months or so. And so therefore, I'm paid less in real terms, even though I'm paid the same amount of money coming out of the US bank account. So yeah, it's going to be something that probably needs to be fixed somehow, but I'm not quite sure how you end up fixing that or what you end up doing in terms of that.
Now, coming back down to earth from that giddy heights of global e-commerce, let's talk about Spotify ads. Spotify's deepened its relationship with the Amazon DSP. I'm going to go make a coffee, James. Tell everyone about this one.
You'll have to be very quick. So Amazon DSP is the thing that you go to if you're a big advertiser and you want to buy across many different places. There are a few of these. There's one called the Trading Desk. There's one called Amazon DSP. There are a few others. And Amazon DSP is a big one. It does, it did $60 billion last year. And yes, you can buy on the Amazon website. So you can buy advertising on Amazon, but more and more, the Amazon DSP is now selling advertising off the Amazon website. You can buy TV ads on Disney Plus or Tubi or Hulu, and now you can buy ads in podcasting through Spotify. So Spotify have made, I think, ads in terms of music streaming for a little bit. They've now rolled out podcasting as well. So that could be a bucket load of more cash put into the podcasting world through this, because it's going to be much easier to buy advertising on podcasts in a programmatic way, at least onto Megaphone and that sort of thing. So it could be very good news. It could be a real game changer for us, or it could be just another announcement around a DSP somewhere, somehow, that we don't fully understand. But let's hope it's the good news rather than yet another announcement.
Perfect timing.
I think it's all good.
Got the latte. Right. Lovely.
Very nice. No, you don't.
No. Now, let's whiz around the world. We've talked about a company called Bending Spoons, not one of your favourites, but it seems, James, that their strategy of aggregating old, stagnating companies, that brands that we might know like AOL and Vimeo and Eventbrite, has worked. They've just done their IPO. It flew out the door at $40. The initial set price was $29, so 40% above the initial strike price. It's 13 years old. They're now worth 25 billion, James. Seems that what we thought about them was wrong and what they thought about their strategy was right.
Well, I mean, maybe. The user base has grown significantly in its 13 years, but of course, because it's bought lots of big companies that have big user bases, people like Evernote or WeTransfer or Vimeo, or indeed StreamYard, who we shouldn't forget, who are owned by them. So
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. So of course it's going to have many more people now. It's going to be doing much more money now than it was 10 years ago because it owns all of these additional companies, many of whom are just a monthly subscription, which most people have forgotten about. So so it's going to do pretty well in terms of that. I guess the question really is, is their successful IPO showing anything good about their company, or is it, and this is a trope in this podcast, a repeating trope of mine, or is it that nobody in the stock market knows what they're doing?
Well, is the whole greater than the sum of the parts, which is what they're trying to do, and this isn't new, by the way. I mean, I was the European marketing director for a company called CMGI in Web 1.0 based out of Boston. We had 60 companies, Rome, Navio, Alta Vista. And the problem was...
Alta Vista.
Yeah, do you remember that one?
Were you the person that killed Alta Vista?
I was, yes.
There you go.
Claim to fame. No, I didn't do that. No, what we did do was we basically hoovered up all these companies and then took a IPO. The company was valued at over $1 billion in those days. And the problem was, once we'd done the IPO, the grown-ups in the company, because I was only a kid at the time, didn't know what to do. So they came up with these stupid synergy strategies. We're going to sell a bundle of CMGI companies, and you would go out and have to market bundles of companies. We'll sell you some search and email, and they weren't things that worked together. They were just absolutely, in their own individual silos as products. But they didn't know what else to do. They'd done the IPO, they made their money. Go and get a few more companies and then sell them. And that's where I think Bending Spoons is going to go. It's done the thing it wanted to do, which is make a ton of money by hoovering up. And now I don't think it knows what else to do. And the last thing I'll say on this, I think this is PodX's strategy. I do,
yes. I was just about to mention PodX. Yes, because this is essentially PodX, but PodX doing it in an industry vertical of podcast companies. They own much of Lemonada Media, they own Platform Media, they own all of these other companies. You could certainly see echoes of PodX in terms of this as well.
Over to Dubai, James. The Dubai Press Club has announced the third edition of the Arab Podcast Programme. It starts on the 13th of July. What's this one?
I think we overlook how big podcasting is getting in the Arab-speaking world. And I think the reason why we overlook it is that we don't speak Arabic. Some of us are a bit suspicious of what a US TSA official called worm writing to me. What's this worm writing in your passport? So I think that we overlook it, but it is massive. And the Dubai Press Club, the government of Dubai, of course, very, very keen to get as many creators in there. They see the future, as does Saudi Arabia, sees the future as being a creator economy for them as the oil begins to run out and as we don't want to buy any oil anymore. And so they are spending a lot of money on creator stuff. And this is the latest of that. The Dubai Press Club headquarters, which I've spoken at and is very fancy. There will be a program that will run for 3 weeks there with podcasters, experts and trainers from across the Arab world, helping people understand how to make great podcasts. So it all looks quite fun and exciting. It's starting next Monday.
Whizzing down nearer to you in New Zealand, there's stuff going on down there as well. What are they doing?
Yes, they're enjoying their fashion chops. That's my Kiwi accent there.
And every Kiwi's face planted right now. Go on.
I'm here all week. Yes, I bought it at the dairy. I don't know why they sound South African.
I was going to say, where have you gone?
Anyway, podcasts, yes. There's another streaming platform that podcasts have suddenly appeared on, TVNZ, which is one of the big TV broadcasters in New Zealand. TVNZ Plus is their online platform, and they, for the last couple of months actually, have been taking video podcasts from an indie podcast maker. So they're available on the TVNZ Plus platform. Between Two Beers is their big one, but they've got a number of other shows on there. It's a company called Frank. I just thought, isn't that interesting? Yes, another company has decided, okay, we're going to bolster up our proper TV shows with crap podcasts. so we're going to put some of these on there. But it's even happening in New Zealand as well.
As Louis Theroux says, cheap TV or crap TV, didn't he? Just crap TV.
Well, in fact, here's the clip.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Louis Theroux podcast, or if you're watching it on Spotify, the Louis Theroux Slightly Shit TV show.
I do love that. Yeah. I do love that. Thank you for the excuse of getting me to play that again.
People News on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, in People News, Elise Bergerson has been hired as Senior Director of Business Development at Libsyn. She sounds like somebody who should be working at Acast with a name like that. But anyway, she's moved from Verve Talent and Literary Agency, where she served as Head of Audio. Interesting that Libsyn still staffing up with new folk there. And a very interesting piece of news. The co-founder of DOAC, Jack Sylvester, who is also the producer of that show for quite some time, has left the company. For the last 3 months, he's been going around South America in a yurt or something. He's posted on LinkedIn, he says, "For now, I don't know what's next," which is always interesting. But so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I mean, obviously, you know, he just might be very rich now and wants to stop working. Yeah. That may be it. I thought that was fascinating, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jack's a lovely guy. I think, has he outgrown, or have they outgrown him? Which way? I don't know. Maybe you can never tell when you've got somebody who's been on the ride with Stephen Bartlett and is Stephen now bigger than, you know, what Jack can offer. Maybe they're going for more. Or it could be, just as you said, Jack's just got so rich, he's just decided to put his feet up and retire. Who knows?
I mean, it could be that, or it could be, frankly, you know, now that now that Diary of a CEO now has so many other people working there. I mean, that is a seriously staffed up company from where it was at the beginning. Maybe he's actually at a point where he's being told by lots of people that now work for him what he should be doing, and he's there going, you know what, I'm not enjoying life anymore, and there's nothing wrong with saying I'm not enjoying life anymore, and so therefore I'm going to move on.
Well, I mean, it's gone from a startup to a corporate company, and maybe the corporate nature of the business doesn't suit Jack's character.
Indeed. Well, many congratulations to Jack. If you want to hear a full-length interview with Jack Sylvester, you can find it in this very podcast back in October 2024. Just go scrolling up there and you will find a show with Jack Sylvester on. So many congratulations to him. Let's move on to awards and events, shall we?
Yeah, look, talking of lists coming out, here's another list. It's a long list in this case. The British Podcast Awards 2026 has recognised 409 entrants across 27 categories. You've done a great job of putting it on Pod News Daily. It's a long list though, James. It's
a really long list. I think, what a clever idea. I've never seen this from an award company before. What a really clever idea, because it's allowing anyone to say, oh, we're in the long list of the British Podcast Awards. Oh, aren't you fancy?
We can't say that, James.
And it's allowing, I mean, we can't because we didn't bother entering. But for example, I know a very indie podcaster. She makes her own show. She's made it for the last 4 or 5 years. She started doing it in lockdown. It's a show called Walk the Pod by Rachel Wheely, who I used to work with once at Virgin Radio a long time ago. She's in this list. I mean, how excited must you be for a show that you literally make in your lunch break, as she does, for your show to be recognised in the British Podcast Awards? I think it's such a clever idea. So well done to the British Podcast Awards for releasing that. You will find that list on the Pod News website. You will notice half of them are apparently independent titles and talent. So that's interesting to see. 53 nominations for the BBC. 11 for Audible, 8 for Audio Always. How many for Goalhanger? 0, because they did not enter, they tell me. Global, I don't think entered, although apparently there are some shows of theirs in there. But interesting to see that the UK's largest independent podcast company, Goalhanger, couldn't be bothered entering the British Podcast Awards. And I suppose, well, yeah, fair enough. Probably made sense too. But that was very exciting to end up seeing. So congratulations to them. Congratulations also, of course, to Sheffield, which is where a lot of podcasting royalty was last weekend with Crossed Wires. It's the UK Podcast Festival, doubling its attendance this year to 50,000 attendees, which is quite a thing, isn't it?
It is. Congratulations to Dino Sophos, friend of the show. We had him on a couple of weeks back talking about it. I must book to go next year. You should go as well, James. We should go there.
Yeah, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to go. I mean, maybe, yeah.
Your parents are around the corner, mate. You've got no excuse.
No, they're not. They're in South Wales.
Oh, they moved, did they?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
bugger.
Down there.
Well,
yes.
Get an Uber. You'll be fine.
But if you want a full catch-up of what happened there, then you'll find plenty of pictures and videos and everything else on the Pod News website as well. But yes, that looks like a really good event. I think there's some very clever financials that go into how that event works as well. We shouldn't forget, by the way, the London Podcast Festival also happening between the 3rd and the 13th of September. I don't know if you saw how I mentioned it in Pod News during the week. I said, live in the UK, love podcasts, scared of Sheffield, the London Podcast Festival.
Yes. North of Watford, do not go.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. But that's going to be a big show. No Such Thing as a Fish is there. Jamila Jamil will be there. Other people are there too. And it's still being held at King's Place, which is where the Guardian is, right next to to King's Cross. And so, I think it's a really good thing. So well worth keeping an eye on that.
I think it's really interesting that the UK is punching above its weight, right? Yeah, I mean, the London Podcast Show is now the best podcast show in the world, period. Mm-hmm. And I think, what Dino and his friends and team have done in Sheffield's pretty amazing. Yeah. It's mirroring the Edinburgh Festival. I'm sure it'll be bigger next year. And the London Podcast Festival, it's, as you said, it's been going for quite a few years, and it's, again, a big festival. You asked the question, I think, on our secret WhatsApp group, what's the US equivalent to this? And it came back with crickets, really.
Yeah, there isn't one, which is really weird. If podcasting, is supposed to be a US thing and owned by the US, even though in my upcoming talk, hopefully, at Podcast Movement, I will be pointing out that the first podcaster in the world from 1949 was a British person, which is
you're not that old, are you?
Which is partially going to be a bit of a joke, but nevertheless, it's kind of a thing that I argue. Anyway. In spite of all of that, there is no big podcast festival in the same way in the US. And I find it fascinating. Now, what you would really need for this to succeed is you would need a friendly creator hub like Sheffield. So you'd need to find one of those in the US, probably Portland, I would guess, would be your place. But anyway, secondly, though, you would need massive support from a big public broadcaster. And that is, I think, the sticking point here, because really the reason why Crosswires does so well is that it's not a BBC event, but the BBC piles a lot of its stuff in there. So there's lots of very big stars. So could you get something, there isn't really a BBC equivalent in the US, but could you get APM and PRX and NPR all playing together, those sorts of people, so that you would have a tweed jacket explosion in Portland? Maybe there's something there. And can you then do it literally over 3 days, which is what Crosswires ended up doing? That's a big thing to do. But there really isn't an equivalent in the US, which is, I've found surprising. And I think it's something that, hey, US, if you're so good, why don't you have this sort of event?
Is South by Southwest turning into a podcast event, though?
South by Southwest is an everything event, yes. And so, again, what is a podcast? Yes, I suppose that you could look at South by Southwest being as part of this, but then, it would be suffocated under the South by Southwest mark. It's really sort of, what is it, Comic-Con and that sort of thing in the US. Resonate is kind of close-ish, but has other things there. There are film festivals which also have podcasts, Tribeca being one of those. It's just really interesting, isn't it? That, as you say, the UK seems to have the biggest and largest podcast festival, the biggest and largest podcast conference get-together thing, as well. And frankly, quite a lot of pretty good content, as well as, companies like Girlhanger. I think the UK is doing some pretty impressive things. I find it fascinating. So I'm speaking, I don't think it's been announced yet, but I'm speaking at the Audio Festival in the UK in early October. And, again, they have deliberately changed their name there away from the Radio Festival to the Audio Festival, so that they can be a bit more open-armed to all audio people. And again, I think that there's probably something there. The radio industry isn't doing that in the US either. So yeah, fascinating.
I think they should call it Podchella. There you go. That's me.
Excellent. You and Podchella or Spotflix, or you should go and buy podchella.com and waste your money on that as well.
Yeah, again, why not? Talking of events that are going on in the US, though, Podcast Movement is going to be in September. They've opened the doors for voting. Voting for what, James?
Yes, so there's two things that they've ended up doing. One of them is opening the doors for voting for speaker sessions. So half of the sessions at Podcast Movement are going to be voted for by you, and you can vote for them right now. You'll find links in the Pod News newsletter, of course. And that is a really interesting way of working out who the speakers are going to be. It's very transparent. It's very straightforward, and away you go. I can tell you who's currently leading at the moment. Stop chasing downloads, start building community is the number one. Lou Mongello, who has spoken at Podcast Movement before, he has over 100 votes already. As a big solo talk. Also in there, number two currently is Latin America is already bigger than US podcasting, which is something that we have covered on this very show. So that's quite nice. And then number three, stop thinking like just a podcaster, building a 360-degree creator business, which sounds like the sort of thing that you would be talking about. But anyway, this time it's Alison Marino and Gogo Zoga. Gogo Zoga, what a great name.
That's a
Gogo
great
Zoga.
name.
Gogo Zoga. Brilliant. Anyway, so you can, maybe see those. So that's what's going on with half of the sessions at Podcast Movement. The other half of the sessions is going to be voted by some sort of independent review committee. All of these names on there.
Anyone you might know?
Well, I know Lauren Purcell from the International Women's Podcast Awards, of course. This is very clever because it's awards and events. People from awards and events have basically been added to this list, and a couple of journalists as well. Amy from the Ambies and the Podcast Academy, of course, Anne Baird from Audio Fiction Conference, from Podcast Review, which is an excellent online publication, the editor of that, Alice Florence Orr, and from Pod News. Oh, I've heard of that. I'm sure I've heard of that. The editor of Pod News, James Cridland, that's me, will also be on this committee as well. So we get to choose the other 50%, basically. So yeah, I think it's going to be very, very interesting.
I think the other name that stands out for me is Peter Lewis from South by Southwest. We just talked about, podcast events, and Brian Barletta, the president of Podcast Movement, is very keen to do stuff with South by Southwest. They've done that this year already. I wonder if there's some synergy that's going to form there.
Yeah, I mean, there may well be. So I think, the Sounds Profitable has been at South by Southwest for many years. Last year, or this year, I should say, it was branded Podcast Movement, but that's certainly a Sounds Profitable thing. And yes, all of that makes sense. I think the job that the committee is going to be doing is we are going to be, there are downsides with a popularity contest, which is what this voting thing is. There's a downside with that, and the downside is that some of the underrepresented voices don't get mentioned. Some of the people that aren't as popular as some of the others, but nevertheless need their voice hearing, should be getting their voice heard as well. And so all of that kind of stuff is very important. And so therefore that's part of the reason why there is a committee there to basically combat the issues that you have with voting, but there are also massive benefits that you have with voting as well. So I think it'll be very interesting at seeing what the what actually comes out of all of this, and it should be a fun time. So I'm looking forward to being there. I'm also going to be at the Sounds Profitable bit for much of that, not all of that, because I'm also get this, Sam.
Ooh.
I'm also lecturing at a university. I should probably not say which one because it's probably not official yet.
Yeah, no, great. Well done, you.
Yes, and then I can claim that I'm a university lecturer in the US as well, which is even more ludicrous than seeing it in the UK and in Australia as well.
The tech stuff on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's the stuff you'll find every Monday in the Pod News newsletter. Here's where Sam talks technology.
Well, first of all, a little happy anniversary. It's the 5th anniversary of the first ever Boostergram. It happened this week.
Happy birthday, Boostergrams. Hey. Will it reach 6? Doubtful. Anyway, happy birthday, Boostergrams. That's a lovely thing.
Now, there was a couple of things that I don't understand. There was a very nice man called Andrew Shell who posted on Mastodon about RSS Cloud Server version 4. Sorry to say I hadn't heard of versions 1, 2 or 3, but version 4 now supports web sub notifications, the push technology that allows people to be pinged when a podcast has been updated. That's different to PodPing. Now, I recall you once telling me that within the original RSS 2.0 spec, Dave Weiner had put in a cloud server capability. Is this what this is? And this is now version 4?
This is what this is.
Right.
Yes, this is what this is. This uses a RSS tag called cloud, which essentially points to where the update server is, and so this is, in fact, even if you go and you have a look at Dave Weiner's stuff now, he still uses RSS Cloud as his sort of thing to make that work, and he gets grumpy if you start talking about a web sub. Yes. So all that RSS Cloud really is it's a lightweight update notification system for the web that makes feed updates instantaneous. essentially. And so, that's what that is. So why are you so excited about version 4.0?
I'm not. It was just Andrew was excited. He put 4.0 out. He said, I spoke to Dave Jones in 2020 and look, I've just brought version 4. And I went, boy, that was 6 years to get the version out.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I'll tell you why you should be interested by it, because it is actually merging WebSub, which is the other equivalent of this. It's merging WebSub together to RSS Cloud so that they will actually just work. So there's full compatibility there, which is quite nice. So that actually is interesting, because that potentially means that it's more interesting to us in podcasting, and potentially is this the replacement to Podping? I mean, there are lots of reasons why Podping is a good thing, and Podping works fine. But is there something else that we can be, that we should have a look at here? There are various parts of Podping, for example, that aren't particularly easy to code for, and the having to run a blockchain and everything else is not a particularly easy thing. So it might be worthwhile having a look at.
Well, I think Pocket Casts, I mean, I know TrueFans does. I'm sure a couple of other apps do as well, have to support both Podping and WebSub, because we realised that just Podping on its own wasn't going to get us the updates we needed. So we supported both standards. Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah.
I'll have a look at it. I'm not jumping into this immediately, but yeah, it was something that piqued my interest. But
Yep.
I needed to understand it better.
I should take a peek and see if I should be supporting it on the other side, supporting how to get updates into the RSS cloud, because I'm sure that there's something complicated that I have to do there as well. So,
Yes.
Yes.
Now, moving on, a couple of weeks ago in Pod News Daily, you wrote a story about a car company called Car Curious. It's a podcast network about cars, and the person behind it is called Ryan Williams. He also put something in there called a proposal for a podcast annotation format, which piqued my interest, because Apple earlier this year came out with something very interesting called timed links, which uses the transcript, and the basic idea behind that is that they are using Apple's AI to go and find entries for books, or maybe a reference to a place or whatever, and then they link it to Apple only external sites. So it might be Apple Books or Apple Music. And it was very proprietary in that sense, but it was a really good idea. And I was hoping that there was going to be a more open standard for using transcripts. Now, I don't know what you think about this, James, but podcast annotations seems to me to be an alternative. I wouldn't say open, because I don't know yet, but an alternative to timed links. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, it could well be used for timed links. It could be used for all sorts of things. The question, I suppose, is whether or not it needs to be different from podcast chapters, which are much the same sort of thing as well. But the good news is that you've ended up speaking to the person behind that, haven't you?
Yes, I thought I'd find out what Ryan was doing. So I started off actually asking, first of all, who is Ryan Williams? What's his background in technology? And to tell me a little bit more, first of all, about Car Curious.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been developing software for upwards of 25 years now. Self-taught developer. Got into web development at the start and then moved to full stack, tech lead, engineering manager, all player coach type roles over the last decade across a number of industries. Transportation, personal finance, telecom, and now in the medical space. But over that time, I've always just been interested as a technologist with new emerging technologies. I've always been a podcast fan throughout the last 2 decades as a listener, and I've tinkered with my own products over the years as well and developing them. And as side projects go, we just experiment and see what kind of sticks as an personal interest, and then see what can become interesting to the community at large. So a couple of my projects have been successful, most have not. And like most entrepreneurs, that's kind of how it goes. And we'll see how Car Curious goes, but it's been fun to just kind of explore new technologies, new space, and new topics.
Cool. So I just want to clarify, you're not a vibe coder. Thank God for that. Right, moving on. Now, Car Curious, you've mentioned it a couple of times. I've mentioned it a couple of times. What is Car Curious?
Yeah, so Car Curious is a automotive podcast platform and player. So two things, really. The player experience is designed to provide a way for people to understand what car podcasters are listening to. I was trying to find an offline hobby last fall, and cars had always been an interest of mine, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time working on them or exploring it. So I wanted to kind of dig in a little more and kind of drive that offline, get me off the computer. So I started listening specifically to car podcasts and to see what everybody was talking about, how they kind of got interested in this. But there were so many model codes, car codes, terms being discussed that I was like, I don't know what this is. I got to go Google it. Or what does this car look like? What's the history of this car? And I'm one of those nerds, I guess, that like after every movie, I go and like look at Wikipedia and understand, okay, what's the story of this movie? And maybe not always after the movie. So if what is that context kind of in line? So I just was like, is there anything out there that does this? What are the technologies to actually support it? And I didn't find a lot in the podcast space. Obviously, in video space, there are many precedents for contextual information. We have Amazon's X-ray video, even going back to like VH1 pop-up video and things like that. And then the second part of it is the platform itself. So like you said, it's a network. So 300 plus automotive podcasts dedicated to this space. Because the other problem I was having with discovery, I found a few popular podcasts, but I'm covering the rest of them. And obviously I'm not going to listen to 300 podcasts, but I just wanted to have a chance to discover what was in the network. And then we can get into a little bit about how discovery is more unlocked by the annotations as well. But those are kind of the two driving things. So just started with the website. There's a web-based player. I have the mobile player in test flight and working in, then getting into the App Store. But yeah, podcast, automotive podcast player and discovery platform is kind of how I think about what Car Curious is for either new car people or car enthusiasts.
Now, I've been talking about podcast networks for the last probably year, but certainly again, it's raising its head, which is the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And the idea here is, for me at least anyway, that you could start the podcast network, Car Curious in this case. You could invite others to join into that network. But the analytics, the follow accounts, the listen numbers, all of those metrics then could be aggregated and taken to advertising agencies. So your $14 CPM could become a $300 CPM, right? And dynamic ad insertion, I assume, you could then have that one ad play across the whole network and then split the monies out based on listener counts, all those things, right? And that's how I see it. And I think that's where you're going with it. So it's really cool to see that. But one thing, because I'm a technologist like you, that really piqued my interest then was this thing called podcast annotations. Now, to set the scene, over the last couple of years, podcasting 2.0 has evolved with the namespace, adding transcripts, chapters, links within the chapters, cover art within the chapters themselves. So imagery can change as you go through the podcast. Apple then added something called timed links, which are hyperlinks basically for discovery within the transcript. So there might be a book reference or a place reference or whatever it may be. And although that's a bit of a proprietary solution, it's a clever solution because it just links back to Apple landing sites, Apple Books or Apple Music. And I've been hunting for an open version of that and been thinking about it. And so explain to me, first of all, what is podcast annotations? Where and how can I use it? And then let's investigate what I think it might be the marriage between what I'm trying to find and what maybe you're developing.
Yeah, so at its core, it represents like an entity at a specific time in the episode. So there's a timestamp and there's a entity description attached to a specific reference in the podcast. And this is all built on those technologies that you mentioned. So transcripts, number one, none of this happens without a transcript. So whether it's the transcript is provided in the feed, which makes my costs certainly a lot better, or I have to do a whisper or transcription, to get that text. So number one is getting that text in. Number two is making sure the text is mostly accurate. So again, there's a whole lot of like transcription issues related to that. Again, that's why it's ideal when transcripts are done upstream. So once we have that, then we can start to understand like what are the pieces of the podcast episode. And really, there are a couple of inspirations here. Like several of the podcasts would put just timestamps in their show notes or the summary tag or description tag, referencing, like, if we look at, like, if you're familiar with Bring a Trailer, which is a popular automotive auction site in the US and Europe, their podcast has like links to their auctions at times in the episode. And I wanted to render that visually because I wanted to go see those listings have hundreds of pictures for that car. So I think that's a very strong visual addition to the player. So building on that, so transcripts are key. Chapters, interestingly enough, I did just pull some data, like only 10% of the podcasts that we track have like podcasting 2.0 chapters tags. And that's mostly driven by Buzzsprout, I know, is a sponsor of yours as well. So,
yep, get that plug in. We need renewals.
So definitely credit to Buzzsprout for driving this. And one of the things here with this whole spec is I'm new to the space. I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to see, like, I had this need of, I wanted to extract an entity at a specific point in time and display that in the player. And I didn't see like a spec that really spoke to that. I know there is chapters, and I know James has advocated like chapters, like super chapters, extending that. Definitely haven't ruled that out. Like that's a strong possibility. I just want to understand from the community and the other people in the space, like yourself, like that sparseness versus like how many entities are we talking? So when we're talking about like Car Curious, I have like 50 to 150 annotations per episode, and a chapter is maybe a handful. So it really comes down to like that density and if we need that distinct thing. But again, going back to that other original inspiration, so many of these people, producers, podcasters, are just putting it in the show notes or the description, like not even in a chapters format today. And speaking to the time links as well, I think we see several kind of ways that this is emerging, right? But not like structured specifically to extract that key information. And I think there's benefits to, once we have that extraction, that annotation, sure, it's attached to that episode and we can visually represent it and we can pop it up in the player. I think your episode last week talked about the glancing economy. I think that was on one of the panels. And this is the interesting alternative to a YouTube dominated space. It's like, if I can have that podcast episode and it's popping something up and I can glance at it, then that's going to meet me where I am when I'm doing the dishes or out on a walk or what have you. And so, like you said, the time links are another indication that this is a need, but it is locked into the Apple ecosystem. And I guess the other kind of ecosystem format is like, what is Spotify doing? Because they are the dominant. I think they have like 20% of the feeds on Car Curious, and like none of them have chapters, and it's a very locked in environment, and they're going to do their version of this, but like we can certainly try to make that experience a little more cross-platform friendly, I guess.
Yeah, you talked about people putting it into show notes, and I think what you've got is Podlove chapters, which is what Spotify and YouTube use, which is fundamentally a bit weird. It's a German initiative that came out left field, and Spotify adopted it and YouTube have adopted it. So apps like TrueFans, my own app, for example, has to support both Podlove chapters. So we hunt for them in the description. When we know there isn't a chapter in the chapters section for the namespace. So we balance that. But it would be lovely if Spotify would adopt namespace 2.0 chapters. They have adopted an element of the namespace. So it's possible. But
Good.
I want to go back to the annotations. There's two questions that are burning in my head. The first one is, how do you put the annotations in there? You're talking about density. I struggle post-show. I'm like, oh my God, I've got 20 chapters now. I've got 20 bits of image art. Now I've got to find these URL, blah, blah, blah. And that's 20. And that's probably a really intense piece of work in the sense that most people only do 2 or 3 or 5. So 20 is a lot. So if you're now talking about 120, or how do you do them? Is it by hand, or is there some sort of automated mechanism that you can use?
Yeah, so it's an automated pipeline. And so going back to kind of like the entry point is the transcription. So once we have that in the system, then there's a 2-layer pass. When I started out, one of my hypotheses here was like, maybe AI can do this alone. I was quickly disabused of that notion that LLMs are not strong enough to recognize all of these concepts and cars and stuff on their own. So the 2 passes are, one, I ended up building a car database with all kinds of aliases and mention patterns and a fuzzy matcher that uses that.
So is this an ontology that you've built?
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to describe it. And so as The pipeline kind of scans the transcript looking for mentions of any of the cars. It can extract the annotations for most of the cars without AI or without an LLM. And really, I think the focus is on the cars because I think that's what people are most interested in. It's why YouTube is such a dominant experience for car media at the moment, is just being able to kind of have that visual. But going back to the kind of origin story, there's other things I want to learn about cars other than just seeing the cars. So the LLM makes the second pass with a very iterative prompt that I've been working on for a long time to try to get that key information extracted into a format that I can pull. And so I tried local LLMs, I've tried OpenAI's, tried Gemini's, currently doing OpenAI's kind of batch on 5.4 mini, I believe. So the quality of the annotations is going to depend strongly on the AI, but this is also a very new space, right? And I think the models will get better at understanding this. And I think there is even some advocacy for it. This could all live in a player at some point. We don't need these pipelines maybe at some point. But my experience was between the transcript not being the super cleanest, needing those aliases and that specific corpus of cars, was that it kind of had to be human in the loop, right? It couldn't be completely done with the LLM to generate the annotation. So once we have the annotations, then we can sync them to the player because the annotation's been extracted at the time. And so that's kind of where I started. I need to sync these. So I created this JavaScript library for the web because I was trying to demonstrate it on the web first that synced to the player. And it turned out that I could do something very similar to the Chapters 2.0 tag. If I had a podcast colon annotations, I could pull that down in the library and then sync it to the audio being played at the same time. And I've got a few different players on the web, like the kind of the legacy where as the show proceeds, it just scrolls down the page and shows the photo. And the photos are mostly pulled from Wikipedia at the moment, or Wikimedia's Commons, with citation and trying to capture that. I think long term, I would like to see the podcasts themselves and users contribute images that we can also have a nice car photo database as well. And then if it's not a car, if it's a term or a topic, then it just floats a little description or context as you go through. And then there's a more immersive player that kind of has a stage. And this will be what the mobile app is, where there's a single stage. As the episode plays, things pop onto the screen to show that context.
Yeah, I call it cinema mode, but yeah, stage is cool as well.
Oh, I like that too. Yeah.
I think I like this. And you've also put out a GitHub for those who want to know more about it. We'll put the URL in our show notes, and obviously we'll talk about it in a minute. So the annotations are very cool. I think going back to Apple's time links, fundamentally, each one of their endpoints, whether it's the Apple Books or the Apple Music, is their ontology. It's a database of items, terminologies, bits that they can then reference in the transcript, which is what you're doing vertically for cars. So it begs the question, do we have to do this for other verticals? And probably the answer is yes. And it's interesting that you mentioned that the LLMs aren't really ready yet, because I know when I posted it to Mastodon, there was people like John Spurlock and Nathan Gathright, very intelligent people in my humble opinion, but they were going, oh, we don't need all of this, we just need LLMs. And I'm like, really? Are we ready for prime time with those? I'm not sure. And your work is telling us that it's not quite ready. So the question then...
And I'm just one person. Other people may have other experiences. So
that's fine, but you rolled your sleeves up and got in the weeds with it. So if anyone's got in the weeds and want to come on and talk about it as well, more than welcome. You know where me and James are. Now, you say it's the side project, and that's what it is. Do you see any form of monetization from the way that you put the annotations? Can the annotations be monetized in any way? Have you thought that far forward?
Yeah, for the annotations specifically, I think not as much, but even what you were kicking off of this interview, talking about that network effect. So combine the two, and I think there is something there potentially. The biggest challenge, I think, is just getting people interested in the product to see if there's enough there to kind of develop an audience around. I think there could be opportunities in terms of advertising, certainly selling cars or doing some kind of car lead gen is definitely a very lucrative thing to do in this space, I'm thinking, and that would fit right into that annotation, right? If you've got a car annotation and you're interested in buying one of those, that would certainly fit in. So as a technologist, I've certainly been more focused on the tech up till now and developing an audience and a user base. But I think remaining flexible on how we can monetize that is going to be key. And I also thought about the hard thing with podcasts, right? But the obvious thing with podcasts is you're going to listen on your phone, right? You're not going to listen on the web. And I know I developed the web first as a prototype.
It's all right. I did the web first. I went that way. It's easier. Honestly, trying to design for a single pixel when it's small on a mobile is so much easier on the web. But go on. Yes.
Yep. So that's where do you do a paid app and subscriptions and all that kind of stuff. But I think ultimately it's that trade-off of audience size. And if we can get to some scale, then certainly those kind of sponsored annotations or the other elements of advertising will probably be naturally more of a podcast play. Interestingly enough, one of the biggest technical challenges, and maybe you're much more familiar with this than I am, is the dynamic ad inserts that are already a key part of the podcast ecosystem, and how challenging that makes syncing up transcripts and annotations in the playback. So there has been, I know Marco Arment from Overcast has done a lot of work in this space, and I kind of read some of his stuff. And then I've done additional trying to understand and fingerprint various parts of audio and sync them up so the player can be on track. It's very easy for them to drift, and that will create a very poor user experience. So that's kind of why I come back to the tech part. There's still some tech and user experiences challenges to nail and make it that great product that people will come back to, I think.
One of my other bugbears is that there are 3 separate containers for information regarding podcasts. So you got your show notes, then you got chapters, then you got a transcript. And Buzzsprout recently did something that I was so happy about, which is they put the chapter titles at the sound point above the transcript. So they embedded them within the transcript, which is just basically a Word document. And I just thought that was so smart. And then you could collapse the transcript down and open it up, blah, blah, blah. And I still don't understand why you need all 3. So I've always, for a number of years, said to James, I really wish we just had one document attached, and then you can evolve that document with annotations, and you can evolve that document with other things, yes. Right? Person tags, so you can see the image of the person, which we do, and all sorts of things. One of the last questions I want to ask you, Ryan, have you seen a secondary network effect, no pun intended, from annotating a single podcast and then finding that there's discovery within other podcasts within the network?
Yeah, great question. I think I would start it off with the cars themselves as somebody who is interested in a specific car brand, Porsche, BMW, or a model, 911, M3. If you want to find other shows that are talking about that, the discovery today is just very difficult. You can Google it, you can search in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You'll probably come up with some episodes, but it's going to be just a varying degree of quality on your results there. And so with Car Curious now, you can go to a specific car page and see all the episodes that have talked about that. And that unlocks that discovery element to see who are the other podcasters that are mentioning these. What are the other cars that are often mentioned with these? So if you want to find related cars, we can jump off to those points as well. And then, like you said, the people, another thing I'm working on is unlocking that guest network. So if I can extract the people that are the guests, which looks like a lot of thought and work has gone into doing some guest tagging, but support for guest tags is also low right now. And so extracting the guests from the text and the transcript, and then seeing what other shows were these guests on? And then places as well. If you're big into the Portland car scene, if you're big into the London car scene, where are the other mentions of those references being brought to life? So that's the discovery element. And I know there was some feedback to that effect on the Mastodon post as well. We can really unlock some of those things if we have this common kind of entity or annotation representing the person or place or the thing.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what you're doing. I'm going to be following along. I think the annotations is a great enhancement to the transcript. I think it's another form, as you talked about, the glimpse networking capability on audio listening, but I can glimpse up and see something. If I want to, as a developer, find out more about this, where on GitHub can I go? Where would you send me?
Yeah, go to github.com/carcurious, and there are a couple of repos there. One is the podcast annotation JS repo, and the spec is in there, but then there's a whole implementation example as well. If you want to play with that in players, and I'll have a Swift one here shortly as well to kind of be the mobile equivalent library. And then getcarcurious.com is carcurious, and /RyanWI on GitHub as well.
Nice. Ryan, thank you so much. Nice idea. Loving how you're implementing it. We'll be following along.
Great. Well, it's great to be here, Sam. I appreciate you having me on.
Boostergram, super comments, zaps, fan mail, and voicemail. Our favorite time of the week, it's the Pod News Weekly Review inbox.
Yeah, so many different ways to get in touch with us. Fan mail by using the link in our show notes, or boosts, or emails, and we share any money that we make as well. We've got, what have we got? We've got a couple of messages here. The first message is from Martin Lindeskog, and he says, is Elsie added to the split? No. I like, no, we didn't do any of that. I like swing jazz music. Martin also says that will mean nothing at all unless you heard the end of last week's episode. He also asks, Sam, how was your holiday?
It was great. Any parent knows when their children have flown the nest, any time you can get back with your children is a bonus. Somebody said something really scary, that you spend 85% of your time with your child before they're 18 and only the other 15% for the rest of their life, because they're off and running, so enjoy it while you've got them. But so it was great to have both the girls with us. We just did nothing. We sat by the pool, we went to the beach, we ate, we drank, we played cards, and it was lovely.
Very nice. And you went to Majorca, which is very good. How was the water in Majorca?
The water in Majorca, yes.
Yes.
You'd have to play the ad for people to understand that one, wouldn't you?
Would I? The clip from Mary Poppins? Was it Mary Poppins? Or was it... yes, it was Mary Poppins, I thought.
Yeah. No, it was My Fair Lady.
Oh, okay. My Fair Lady. There you go.
And then we got 1,600 sats from Seth Goldstein, Philly, FTW. What's that a reference?
Yes, Philly for the win. It's because I was talking to Elsie about when I first met, and that was in Philly, in the market next to the tediously boring hotel that Podcast Movement was in that year, and where I met Elsie and Rob, and for a podcast that they used to do is the phrase that I used. So that was all very good. We've also had a voicemail, and it's another Australian voicemail. Here is Will Clark.
Hello, James and Sam. Will Clark here from not so sunny Melbourne, Australia. I figured I couldn't let the Clarks of Adelaide have all the voicemail fun. As a history podcaster, it's great to see that James is joining the bandwagon with a session on the history of podcasting at Podcast Movement, and I have already voted for it.
Vote for it.
But that did get me wondering if there was a way to know which power supporters had sessions that were currently up for voting, and how best to be able to support our fellow power supporters. I've got a session myself called From Passion to Profit, Crossing the Chasm to Full-Time Creation. If that sounds interesting, please do give it a vote. And likewise, let me know who else I can support in the Podcast Weekly Review community. Thanks for all your work, gentlemen, and hopefully see you in New York.
It's always good to hear from another Australian accent. So excellent, 53 votes so far for that particular session, which is nice. How many have I got? 16.
Really?
Yes. So there we go. Yes. No, and Will actually said in an email to me, he said, I tell you what, why don't we have a WhatsApp group for the power supporters? What do you think of that?
Okay, I'll take on that task. Yes, I'll create that. I can hear that was what the request was. No, it's a good idea.
I think that's quite a nice idea, isn't it? Yeah.
One more place.
That would be a fun. I know, one more place, but a WhatsApp group or a Signal group.
No.
What do you think?
No. Just
Signal group.
No one in the world knows that's where you and I hang out. So no, we're not
Signal
adding
group.
any more people to that place.
No. Signal group. Okay, WhatsApp group then. Will, thank you for the idea. Much appreciated. And slightly late, but still, we managed to get it in. Another voicemail.
Hi, James. Welcome back, Sam. It's Neil at Podnose here, Neil Velio. And well done to Elsie Escobar on last week's episode. Obviously, you covered the podcast Atlas. And for me, the stat about 78 to 55 in screen-free moments, which is obviously when people are commuting or they're between meetings, maybe going out for a walk. To me, that is beautiful data because I've been preaching to the choir as long as I've had breath that that's exactly how our ideal listeners are consuming their content. Obviously, we're very niche towards the B2B market. But as I always say to people, these decision makers are not watching your show on a sofa at 7:30 with spaghetti sauce around their chops and the kids screaming about wanting to watch Peppa Pig. So all that video first pressure that Ariel called out in that panel, yeah, I agree. Certainly for B2B podcasters, it's mostly a distraction from what actually builds that relationship. So, yeah, great point there.
Well, what else has happened for you?
Well, I've got a bit of a mad week this week. I've got, sadly, one funeral to go to on Saturday. I've got one graduation to do on Friday, which is my daughter who's graduating from Birmingham University. And last night, because we're recording this on Thursday, but it'll be out on Friday. Last night, I went to Henley Festival, which I always do. We take the boat up on the river and we go and listen to whatever artist is there.
We take the boat up on the river. Do you?
To meet the flotilla. Yes, it's very posh. But it's lovely. And we have rosé all the way up and it's lovely. You could have a beer if you wanted, James, when you come over.
Nice.
But
nice.
Yeah, it's lovely to do, and it takes about an hour or 2 hours, depending on the locks that you have to go through. But anyway, long story short, it was Boy George last night, who was rubbish. He did one track that everyone knew. We were all excited because we were playing on the boat.
Come a chameleon.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
No,
do you really want to hurt me?
No, he didn't do that one. He did a David Bowie cover, and he did a load of Bob Marley reggae. And we're like, nobody's come here for that, mate. Read the room. But I got home for 3:00 in the morning. And I then played paddle this morning at 7. So my own fault.
Well, your own fault.
Yes, 3 hours. The world's smallest violin over here. But yes, so that's been my week.
Wow. Okay.
The other thing I've been dealing with is people who don't understand RSS, and it really annoys me because I get so many people going, "Why has my podcast appeared in your app? I didn't ask for it." And it's like,
oh, yes.
Do you understand how RSS works? But I've got to say that nicely, other than condescendingly. So yes. That's
there's a page all about this on the PodNews website.
Oh right, I'm finding that. I'm pointing it to them. Yes,
because I absolutely linked to it, and it basically says if you send us a DMCA request to get your podcast taken off, then obviously I'll take your podcast off. But secondly, I will make fun of you mercilessly because you do not understand how podcasting works. No. Yes. No, it's a real frustration, isn't it? Real frustration.
And then while I was away, Mo, my CTO, was busy. So we've updated Premium RSS to support both L402 and F402, so lightning payments and fiat currency payments, which is great because we did that as an app, but we're now doing it as a host. So that's great. And more to come on that. I won't go into more detail here. We added cross promotions, which is not the same as adding to the audio. What we do is if you've claimed a podcast on TrueFans, we then show an advert in the second slot of a podcast that you're visiting. And we say, would you like to have your podcast listed here? And then there's a request button, which then goes to the person's podcast page, who can then accept or reject it. And you can choose the duration and the amount of money you're willing to pay that podcaster to have your podcast promoted on their page. So, for example, if somebody wanted to promote on PodNews Weekly Review, we would get a request. You or I would then accept or reject it. And that promo would sit there with their cover art and their latest episode showing in slot 2 of our podcast page. So that's what we're doing there.
Nice.
We built a gifting service for ourselves. So we were onboarding a few people and we wanted to gift them some hosting 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And I thought, well, actually, why can't we give that as a feature to fans? So fans can now go onto a podcast page, look at the merch tab, and then they can gift hosting. Obviously, you have to be hosted on TrueFans, so it wouldn't make sense for you, James, for someone to gift you 3 months of TrueFans hosting. You're not going to switch. Yeah. But if you are already hosted on TrueFans, then in the merch store, you will now have the option as a fan to gift your favourite creators free hosting.
Nice. Well, there you go. That sounds like a smart plan.
And then the last two things very quickly. One thing that I wanted to do is build it. No one asked for this, by the way, so God knows why I did it. But topic suggestions. The idea is that now on your podcast page, fans can go there and suggest topics they might want you to talk about. And other fans can then vote up those topics. So you as a creator might say, why don't you give me some ideas of what you want to hear from me? Fans go and do that, and other fans can vote it, and maybe then the creator says, yeah, that's a topic I'll cover in my next episode. So we built that. And finally, pod rolls. We like the idea of pod rolls. We've got one here for Pod News Weekly Review, but we wanted to also have an option where a fan can request to be in our pod roll. So again, we don't have to accept it, but it's a nice way to interact with your community. So now on your podroll page, you'll be able to send a request to your favourite podcaster to be added to their podroll.
Okay, very good, very good. Gosh, well, yeah, you've been busy.
I should go away more often, really, shouldn't I?
Yes, that's usually how these things work.
And then the last one...
I'll tell you what, it's because he's achieved so much because he hasn't had you on the phone.
Exactly. Knackered.
That's what's going on there.
Exactly.
Shut up, I'm trying to do some work.
Yes. Go on, Claude, get on with it. Now, the last thing, we had Liam Heffernan on the show from Mercury, who created something called the Independent Podcasters Day on the 4th of July. It was a way of promoting indie podcasters, and it was a good initiative. I know Pod News got behind it. I know True Fans did. I know quite a few other people did as well. So well done, Liam. What we did is we created a dedicated page. So you can go onto True Fans and you can now go onto the indie podcast page and see all the podcasts that were being promoted, and they're in a playlist. So yeah, well done to Liam. And that's our little bit of support. So that's what we did. So James, what's happened for you while I was away?
Well, I mean, I have, so two things has happened. One thing has happened is that I finally got my solar installed, which is very exciting.
I know a number of people have asked me about that. They wanted to make sure you're okay.
Yes.
So that's good news.
Yes, so that's been very exciting. Actually, there's one bit that hasn't quite been installed yet. So that is coming tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Brilliant. Which is the plug for the car. But
right.
If you ignore that bit, then everything else has been in there. And what has been fascinating is I've gone from spending a fair amount on electricity to spending literally nothing. I've spent probably 50 cents most days on electricity because it's charging a battery. But I worked out how to charge the battery during the 3 free hours of electricity that I get given as part of my electricity thing. So during those 3 hours, the system is set to pull as much as you can from the grid and charge the battery up. And it's been really interesting to play around with that and to see what I can do and to see how much how much I can take from the grid without the electricity company moaning and all that kind of stuff. So that's been fascinating to play around with that, and hopefully the last bit will be first thing in the morning tomorrow when the man comes in with my plug for the car, which will enable me to basically plug the car in and go, if there's any spare after you've charged the battery and after you've dealt with the house, if there's any spare, please could you put it in the car rather than sell it back to the grid, because I earn virtually nothing from that. So so that's been fun to do.
Genuine question for you.
Yes,
I'm sure you have a spreadsheet. What was the amortization period of the cost of the solar panels before you broke even?
It's very difficult to answer that question because obviously the price of electricity changes a lot, and you're never quite sure. But I mean, I could probably work out that and also of course, I didn't pay for most of the solar because most of the solar is. Because I paid for the solar originally, and then there was a massive hailstorm, and there were holes in the solar system. So therefore, I've paid quite a small amount in comparison, because I've upgraded it. But most of it was insurance, so it's it's an interesting one. But what I can tell you is when I got the solar originally in 10 years ago, or nine years ago, I think I paid for it within 6 years easily.
Yeah, so that's your amortization period. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But so it's going to be fascinating seeing. But I think having a battery is a game changer. The only other thing that you notice when you've got a battery is you notice how big the battery is in the car, because the battery for the entire house is 20 kilowatt hours, right? So 20 sounds like a big number, right? The one in the car is 64. So the one in the car is considerably bigger, 3 times bigger than the one that's actually powering the entire house. And you suddenly realize how much electricity EVs use, because they've got to, move a ton of metal around. And so you suddenly realize, wow, it's a very different world than the entire house. But so it's been really interesting sort of playing around with that and doing all of the Home Assistant stuff, and all of that, which I've nearly got working correctly. Yeah,
we've got an EV or a hybrid, and there was a recall on it by Jaguar Land Rover, and the cost of a battery replacement, I was told, was £11,000.
Oh yeah.
Crazy high number.
It's the engine, isn't it? It's the thing that makes it go. Yeah. So yes.
Thank God it was on warranty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, it's been interesting playing around with that. So that's been one thing, and the other thing that I've been doing this week is mostly spending it in bed, because I ended up catching the worst cold in the world. I could feel it coming on this time last week with Elsie. I could feel it coming on, but I thought, I should be all right. And I was just so Friday's Pod News. If you want to have a look at what Pod News looks like if I spend the bare minimum amount of time doing it, then Friday's Pod News was it. It went out with the wrong artwork because I was because I was running so much of a temperature I didn't even know. I messed that bit up, and it was just 4 very quick stories, which is the minimum that the template needs. I have to have 4 stories,
right?
And that was it. And that was just sort of right. Pile that out, and get that done as quickly as possible, so I can go back to my sick bed. The perils of having a single person business.
I'd also say the wife's away, and you're on dodgy takeaways. It might have something to do with it.
To be fair, it's probably because I've not been bothering to cook for myself, because why would you?
Yeah.
And so I've been having, the ready meals and stuff, and it's probably something to do with that. So who knows? But anyway, that's that really. And that's it for this week. All of our podcast stories taken from the Pod News daily newsletter at podnews.net.
You can give us feedback using the Buzzsprout fan mail like Will did. Voicemails are really good. In our show notes, you'll find the link, or become a monthly power supporter like the 24 power supporters at weekly.podnews.net. And you too might be able to join the secret new WhatsApp group I haven't formed yet.
Yes, our music is from TM Studios. Our voiceover is Sheila D. Our audio is recorded using Clean Feed. We edit with Hindenburg. And we're hosted and sponsored by Buzzsprout. Start podcasting, keep podcasting.
Get updated every day. Subscribe to our newsletter at podnews.net. Tell your friends and grow the show. And support us. The Pod News Weekly Review will return next week. Keep listening.